Thank you so much. Yeah.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another session of Policy Matrix's online webinar series where we connect policy experts with policy enthusiasts. My name is Arunima Charabutur. I am a third year political science student at Lady Shri Ram College for Women, Delhi University. And today we have with us Yukti Sharma, who is a fellow at International Innovation Corps, which is associated with University of Chicago's Harris School of Public Policy. She's also currently the functional lead for the Digital Health ID. Yukti has had a very interesting journey in terms of how she approached policy. She finished her postgraduate diploma in liberal studies at Ashoka University's coveted Young India Fellowship after completing her bachelor's in technology at JP University of Engineering and Technology. So, Yukti, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Arunima.
So we will jump right into it. The way that this interview is structured is that we have 4 questions covering a wide variety of issues. So my first question to you, which is more generic than the rest, is that what inspired you to pursue a career in politics?
Okay. Okay. So that we needs some storytelling on my part. It's an engineer by education, so I finished but enjoyed engineering. I think my on ground driving implementation of sustainable and scalable solutions, and I about that, and that is what led me to Young India Fellowship, right? I mean, liberal arts is an interplay of multiple streams, multiple sciences, be it science, be it social sciences, humanities, and a lot more, right? So I think that's what led me to Young India Fellowship. I always wanted to understand how solutions are implemented on ground and how we can create more data driven policies, right? So I mean, that's how I joined the Young India Fellowship, and I worked with few Anganwadis to see how Anganwadis were digitized, and how the policies that we read, right? Like the policy papers that we read, how does it translate on the field, right? That was one of the interest areas that I had at that point of time. And I think I also worked with Choti Si Asha, which provided sustainable livelihood to women from low income households in Chandigarh. And yeah, I mean, I knew that I always want to work in development space, either working on ground or designing and implementing sustainable solutions. And that's how, yeah, I went back to tech for a brief period of time. I worked with a startup after Young India Fellowship, and I worked as a product manager. But I think I was destined to come in policy product space, because even in my startup, there were multiple questions raised around data, because we were working on digitizing KYC solutions. KYC is Know Your Identity. If you must know this, if you go and open a bank account, they will ask certain identity documents from you, and to establish your identity, right, as an individual. So we were working on digitizing the same. And while we were doing all of that, I came face to face with the question of data, right? I mean, technology today permeates all walks of life, right? You, at this point of time, you're sitting, we are having this conversation on Zoom, we are basically texting each other on WhatsApp, and we are creating terabytes of data on a daily basis, right? And for me, that was a question that sparked this whole debate on uh, is technology driving us? Is there someone who is regulating technology? Is it because um, remember how technology also has a way of like influencing our decisions, right? Influencing our day-to-day influencing us day to day, right? So all of these questions basically made me wonder, and I used to mull on the fact that India does not have a data privacy law yet. It's still a bill, right? And I came face to face during my work with a startup in Mumbai, and we were dealing with lot of data and lot of personal information of individuals, right? While we were very conscious and cognizant of the responsibility that was given to us as third party data processors, we it made me go back to drawing board and understand how data laws all across the world work. How should how we should increasingly invest in data analysis capabilities, make sure that our policy is driven by data analysis, is driven by understanding how um, people interact, how technology influences citizens. And yeah, and that's how I knew that, okay, while I will develop products, I will continue designing products, I would also want to understand policy, because I also believe in ethical use of tech. And if not now, then we'll be too late. And I think that is what made me decide that I need to leave my corporate job yet again and join International Innovation Corps, Harris School of Public Policies program. And yeah, and after that, it was all policy for me for 1 year. I worked with Ministry of Health and Family Welfare on AI policy for 1 year, and now I'm with National Health Authority working on policy and product space. Yeah, because I'm an engineer who was interested in all of this, and I think we need more engineers in policy space.
I think
Yeah.
exactly what this one sentence that you pointed out was this entire emphasis on data driven aspect of policy. I feel like this is something that is very lacking in the status quo when you don't have technocrats involved in the field, when you don't have a lot of people involved who are professionals, let's say, about the data sphere, actually involved in the process of making bills, is when you have lapses. And I think it's really great that you pointed out you need more engineers in the field, because I think that is something that is so important, because unless you have like more people analyzing data, analyzing how the impact of policies work, which I think is something is very technical in nature. And I think a lot of people involved in the field right now probably don't have that technical expertise. I think that engineers can definitely bring something to the field. And I think from the way that you're describing it, your path seemed like this is like an inevitable ending of sorts. So like that was
Yeah.
pretty cool. So my second question is kind of linked to this. So do you think that there is a degree of
Okay.
versatility in terms of backgrounds of people interested in policy? Because you come from like an engineering background, and what we archetypically assume is that someone only from like social sciences will enter this field. And like, do you think that there is more than one path to do like policy?
Okay. Yes, that's a very interesting question, and I think I can. I've had the privilege to work with brilliant people from different walks of life, coming from different backgrounds. Just to give you an example, my last team, while we were working in Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, we were a team of 5 people, right? Out of 5 people, one was a doctor. This guy had done, a manager was an MBBS doctor. He had studied health economics, and then he had come back to India to work in the development space. My team lead was a lawyer, is a lawyer. He was a lawyer. He understood policy space much better than we did. So yeah, so he was from the law space, right? My teammate, she had done her undergrad in psychology, and I come from electronics and communication. I'm an engineer, right, who has worked in the software development space. And there was another person who was also an engineer, who's also a liberal arts graduate, had worked in pharmaceutical space. So basically this gives you a fair idea of how we need people from different walks of life to come together and think about these solutions, right? Uh, Let me give you an example, right? I mean, I think that will break it down for you very concretely as to why this is important. And I think people should, from all walks of life, should consider a career in policy, even if it interests them just a little bit. I think they should consider this. Um, consider artificial intelligence, right? I mean, this is where I work, so I'll try to give you an idea of how does a lot of different people can come together and devise solutions, right? When we say artificial intelligence or machine learning, right, the concept or the name itself, though is a buzzword, it seems daunting, right? It seems daunting because it is assumed to have a lot of technical like it's assumed to be highly technical, right? But now imagine, while we talk about AI and we talk about how you understand, right, that AI has the capacity to augment human processes, right? It has the capacity to thinking skills, it has the capacity to deliver unbiased judgments, right? Let's just say in medicine, right? I mean, uh, a diagnosis that will require multiple doctors, some amount of time, an AI algorithm can probably give you an answer in less than 30 seconds, right? If this algorithm is trained on good data, right? While we understand how, it can develop consistently faster and scalable solutions, we also have to understand that it has the potential to further entrench human biases, right? It has the capacity to act in an unreliable way. It has the capacity to augment a developer's bias into the result, right? So how do you deal with this? It's while an understanding of artificial intelligence is important, it's also important to understand how biases work in day-to-day life, right? It's also important to understand how a very tiny edge case in data, which is for example, there was this recently I can't remember the name of the company, but I think it was Amazon, but I'll go back and check and confirm. But see, they utilized an AI algorithm that essentially helped them identify potential candidates for interview, right? while this while the variables that were used in creating these algorithms were seemingly fair, impartial and unbiased, right? But eventually over a period of time they realized that they had this algorithm generally favored men as opposed to women, because historically women are not do not form a significantly large um, significantly large like they don't occupy as much workforce as men do. So, well, a seemingly harmless algorithm led to a lot of women being rejected at the interview stage because the algorithm did not think they were good enough, right? So while understanding of tech is important, you also have to understand that it's all it needs to be regulated before it's too late. It's need to be regulated to that it has to be regulated in such a way that we are able to augment, we are able to develop solutions that are unbiased, that are fair, that are also made in mind, uh, that are also developed keeping in mind that all our human interactions are an interplay of multiple things, and these human interactions later um, lead to development of solutions, be it tech. So while we all continuously debated on um, different variables that affected AI, development of AI and implementation of AI, I think us coming from different walks of life, for example, I could explain a technical problem to my team. See, this is what it means. This is what a false positive is. These are the implications of a false positive or a false negative in an algorithm. My colleague who was from the law space, who could actually help me break down the basic principles on which certain laws were made and how those laws were very important, right? Whereas my colleague from the psychology background probably understood human interactions much better than we did, right? So I think I have seen multiple key people coming back to your question. I've seen multiple people come from different walks of life. And I think at the end of the day, it's amazing. It's brilliant how we all can come together, collaborate, and discuss on solutions that will eventually impact policy. I know it took longer, but I hope I was able to put my viewpoint across.
Not at all. In fact, it made a lot of sense. I think the way that you explained this all-encompassing very nature of policy is something that I think is so important, because now that I think of it that way, like when you think of policy, usually you just think of like a law and then you push it and then it becomes implemented.
Yeah,
That's the whole problem, right? Like that is not working right now. You need so many people from
yeah,
different walks of life having and a part to play in that conversation, which is only when it starts working, right? And I think that is such an
yeah,
interesting thing, because we are clearly, like, I mean, if you just do this law passing aspect, a lot of stereotypes and prejudices that kind of play into it, which can only be kind of negated when more people from different walks of life who have their different lived experiences necessarily go ahead and engage. And I think that's like a beautiful point, and I think that was
yeah.
very well pointed out here, and I think that is something that I will keep in mind next time round.
Yeah.
Slightly related to this as well is my third question, which is about what are some of the challenges that you have faced in this particular field, and how do you in particular overcome them? And do you think that your identity as a woman affects the way that you operate in this field? And would you call your identity as a woman a challenge in this particular?
Okay. That's an interesting question. I see. I'll answer this question in two parts. First, answering to the challenges bit, and then I'll come to the women part. So when I think about challenges, the first ever challenge that I faced was identifying various avenues that were available to me, right? Because see, when I came here, honestly, when I started interacting with people, I was just mesmerized by the amount of and the breadth of knowledge that people had. And I wished someone would have just told me 4 years back or 5 years back, see, Yukti, you have these options available, right? I mean, you really don't need to join a software company, an MNC, and work 9 to 5 on uh, on a problem that comes day after day, and you are just working on the um, same system, working on same code, and you're just a very dispensable cog in a larger wheel, and the wheel so large that you can't even imagine how this wheel looks like, right? So I did not know what were the options that were available to me. That was the biggest challenge. I think people I really believe that everyone has some or the other superpower, right? Not everyone is smart in the same field, right? People tend to be smart. It's just they haven't identified their passion yet, haven't identified their work stream yet. This is what I believe personally. So first challenge for me was to break that loop I was in, right? My life was monotonous. For 2 years, I thought about getting out. For me, I knew that I wanted to work in development space. Honestly, I did not have much idea about what policy was. How, I mean, I did not know policy outside my civics textbook in class 8th and 10th, to be very honest. And I mean, for me, policy was deeply linked with politics, lobbying, and that I always felt that that was not for me, because I do not come from that background where I can just like jump in without having any idea. And also, I did not know where to look for. It took me 2 years. I still remember one of the entries in my diary that started with, um, as colorful as the building of my like the cabins in my office are, grayer are the shades of the lives people live, because it was day in day out the same thing, and I did not know. And for me, I wanted to work in development space, and I knew that for me, the idea was someone wearing a khadi kurta and kolhapuri chappal, going door to door, knocking, and just like trying to educate people or trying to do some good. That was my idea of development space, right? I think it took some amount of courage for me to just like leave my job and say, okay, fine, I'll never work in the software space again. I'll just if I get a job, good. If I don't get a job, good. It was a lot of uncertainty, and uncertainty fuels fear, right? So I think insecurity breeds fear and uncertainty fuels it. So that was the biggest challenge I faced. And I think Young India Fellowship for me opened many doors. And if you ever go and look at the class profile of Young India Fellowship, you'll be amazed to see people. I mean, the different streams people come from. I always thought that every postgraduate college in the country will have majority of engineers, unless and until it's heavily humanities focused program. But Young India Fellowship just surprised me, because I have friends who are lawyers, I have friends who are in arts, I have friends who are dancers, who are singers, who are engineers, and whatnot. And that changed my perspective on things, right? And I think that is what I needed. I mean, break the mold. You need to. I understand that it's uncertain, but I mean, just take one step. That was the first challenge that I faced. And post that, it's all been a story of consistent hard work, right? Like, you just work hard, you find right people, you find good mentors professionally and personally, and stick by them, right? And work incredibly hard. So yeah, that has been the one major challenge that I faced, and that has stuck by me. Yeah. So coming back to the second question, my identity as a woman, I think um I still remember a conversation I had with my CEO of my previous startup, this really, really smart and brilliant man. I actually, he became my mentor. And, you know, initially I was struggling. I was the only female at that point in the product management team, and also in the senior management team. I was the only female at that point of time, right? And I would often struggle, because there's this concept of IQ and EQ. And we once had a long discussion on, he just called me and he's like, hey Yukti, are you facing any challenges in the workplace? And I just looked at him and I just said, just because I can't crunch numbers like in seconds does not make me less smart. I mean, women are historically, I don't know, I don't want to generalize it or stereotype it, but I think women have amazing EQ, at least most of the women that I have met. And it's a skill that is not as valued as basically other skills in a workplace, right? So I never had a leader to look up to. That is one thing why we need more women in the workplace. We need more women in the workplace so that they can oil the engines, they can kickstart, um, they can kickstart something, right? I mean, when you see a woman at a very high position, you are inspired and you can imagine yourself there. I mean, it's not like, I've never, to be very honest, not specifically looked at myself as um, a woman struggling in a workplace. Not so much. This is when in retrospective, when I think about things, this is how I think. If and then eventually, women joined the senior management. She was the chief operations officer, and oh my god, this was brilliant. I mean, I just immediately became friends with her, and the way her leadership style was so different. It was based on the concept of empathy and compassion, and oh my god, it was brilliant. Like, I learned so much from her, and I realized that for us to kickstart change, we really, really need more women at very high positions, just so that you know that you're not alone. There are seemingly intractable problems are not that difficult, right? Because then you are not just you know that you are not just filling a diversity quota in a company, but you know that you are there because of hard work, because a lot of other women have made it, right? So yeah, I think that's one thing that has stuck by me, and the challenge that I just outlined. Yeah.
I think a lot of things to unravel here. Firstly, I will go step by step. So I think firstly,
Yeah, sure.
discussion about access to options is so important, because leave access to options, people don't even have information about the kind of options that they have in terms of like careers. And this is
Yeah.
also coming from someone, I'm
Yeah.
in my third year of political science, and even then a lot of students in my this thing do not even consider policy an option because they don't know anything about it. And like the issue with that is, again,
Yeah.
the only understanding of policy we have comes from like civic textbooks, and very few people are actually on the field who are
Yeah.
trying to change that conversation, that it's not just about going and surveying. It can take many forms. Policy can be about somebody coding for the welfare of people, it can be about someone who's actually serving, it can be so many other things. I think this definition of policy, I think this is something that has
Yeah.
changed in the recent years, but again, not a lot of people know, is that it's a very wide arena. And like you said, it can include doctors, it can include lawyers, it can include engineers like yourself. And I think
Yeah.
we need more discussions which enable people to realize that this is actually an option for people who are interested in doing like social good. And I think
Yeah.
it's like, I think
That is true.
conversations like the ones you and I are having, and hopefully the people who will see this video kind of understand that, you know, if you, like you said, you have an inkling of you wanting to leave your 9 to 5 job and working for the welfare of people, I think they should know that policy is a very, very viable option in that sense. Also, like, secondly, when you talked
Yeah.
about the importance of women being involved in the field, I think that is so important, because when we talk about how EQ is delegitimized, I think this is like a historical thing where like emotional labor is not ever considered to be proper labor. It's always, you know, mental labor that is
Yeah.
prioritized, and emotional labor is what keeps, like, I mean, people sane. And I think at least during the pandemic, people have little bit realized what the importance of like this emotional labor is. And like you said, like when your um CEO joined and she was a woman, the entire leadership style was also very different. And I think that is what women bring to the table, which is like a lived experience of sorts, which otherwise is excluded from the conversation. And I think that is so
Yeah.
important. And like I hope that,
Uh, uh,
yeah,
I was just going to just say one thing. I mean, that would that put things in perspective for me in terms of EQ IQ debate. Not stereotyping here, not generalizing at all. People can. I've met men who have amazing EQ, and I've met women who are brilliant at crunching numbers, right? But there was this one thing, this discussion that I had where I can't believe that I put it down so simply. I don't know, but I just said, for example, uh, y- somehow an IQ will enable you to create a deck, will help you identify how your resources should work to maximize efficiency, right? I mean, they should work for these many hours to maximize this efficiency, and that's how you can chart out your operations roadmap. Whereas a person with strong EQ will tell you how they are going to work so that you prepare for all the possible scenarios. So I think a healthy mix of both is very important, and that I think that's why collaboration is the key to success.
yeah, I think definitely analyzing behaviors in general, and which is something that is more attributed to EQ, is slightly shifting over to the other side. But I think that the shift is
Yeah.
something that needs to be put, I think, much focus on. And I think if one good thing that has happened during the pandemic is like some people finally realizing the importance of empathy. And I think
Oh
during
yes, yes.
troubling times, everybody's just been forced to kind of be cognizant of that. And I think at least that is one good thing that has come out. So I think
Yeah.
very interesting change. And that brings me to my final question, which is linked to the pandemic, which is that given this
Okay.
situation, given the pandemic that we're living in, which has completely changed the way that we view like social welfare nets and policy as a whole, with everything being
Hmm.
online, and for a long time people were not even able to access any of the audiences who generally seek aid in terms of like social aid or whatever. How do you think that this is going to change the way that policy practitioners function? And how do you think that the realm of policy will change in, let's say, 2021, since this year is almost over?
Okay. Fourth industrial revolution is tech revolution. And it's basically, okay, there are multiple things to this, right? So while I have not been able to work from home, I actually did not have the privilege to work from home this entire duration of the pandemic, but I have all of my friends and everyone, my flatmates, everyone is working from home. So uh, there are multiple sides to this story, right? While so I predominantly work in the tech space, right? I generally look at it from the lens, like policy lens. Policy for me basically helps me focus on human-centered design in my products that I develop, right? So for me, policy is that. For me, the permeation of tech in our day-to-day life influences my policy. But when we talk about effect of pandemic, right? Even though it has made even though it has made us more empathetic and compassionate, I don't sometimes I have hard time believing that as well. I'll tell you why. Initially people are empathetic, but eventually it becomes run of the mill problem, right? Like for example, people are itching to get back to their offices because at least their work day ends at 5, right? When you say work from home, it never ends because you're working from home and people just assume that you are chilling on your like lounge and just like with your laptop, and you can work at 11 in the night as well. So how this is changing is an interesting problem to look at, right? How do you create boundaries there? That's also very important. That's one. Then another aspect to this is, now this is, I was talking about people who are very tech savvy, and a large percentage of our country still is not very digitally literate, right? So I was reading about this problem where domestic abuse has increased significantly during pandemic, right? This raises another question, right? This raises another question as to what are the, I mean if I think about it, I think that we need to, like, so I also work in animal welfare, right? While So I've been looking at all the new problems that have come up. So one was this, where I saw that the number of women filing for domestic abuse, trying to run away from their house because now their abuser is in the same house as they, and they don't get a breather, right? So while I was also looking at this problem, and I think we need to prepare ourselves for these kind of things coming out. uh, I was also, since I also work in the animal welfare, I also looked at issues where uh, animals were not fed enough because people were not out on the streets. So a lot of animals were turning violent, and they were dying and they were starving. So that's another problem that you can see. So I don't yet know what are the long-term implications of something as unprecedented as this pandemic, but I think the ways of human interactions, ways of human interaction is evolving, and we need to be better prepared, be it digitally or be it on ground. We need to be better prepared. Uh, we need to be working in tandem, right? Our policy cannot be from the 20th century. Our policies need to, and that is where data driven policy making comes into play, right? When you start looking at numbers, it's when you start looking at the number of women um, filing complaints for domestic abuse, and you see the trend that, oh my god, in the last 6 months it has increased significantly. That's where your policy should come in, and it should come to make the life easier for these victims, right? It should come up and see, okay, so we need to start setting up helplines. We need to design long-term solutions for these problems. Maybe these problems were not raised. these problems were there, but they never came on surface because, I mean, we all are struggling, right? So this is one. Then second, while people are frustrated, they're exhausted, they're also working more just because they cannot afford to leave their jobs. This includes people who are working in tech space. This also includes people who are working as like, for example, my help, right? She's working more because she's scared to lose her job, and that stands true for a lot of my engineer friends also, people who are working in policy space also, because the market is not good enough. So how do you deal with these challenges, right? I mean, these are just some things that I think existed, but um, they're just coming on surface. So how your interactions are changing in this pandemic is something which is interesting to look at. There are some really new problems that have come up because now we interact differently with people. Our behaviors have changed, our interactions have changed. The information exchange has also gone completely digital, which opens another Pandora's box. As easy as it looks, it's not as, I mean, the implications of the same can be disastrous if not, like, countered with, or not, if we don't come up with good regulations around the same. So yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking out loud as I'm answering you as to uh, what are the new challenges that we're facing. And I think we need to equip ourselves, and our policy cannot be just based on secondary research. While I also do secondary research, I think we need to start looking at data. We need to start looking at, for example, you are a political science student, right? While you read those textbooks that were probably written few years back, you also need to understand the rising, I mean, the changing political climate, right? And how, and basically you should start looking at data and how things are changing. So yeah, I mean, uh, yeah, I think, I don't know if that answers your question, but I think we have new problems and we need creative solutions,
I think it
even in the policy
definitely,
space.
yeah, I think it definitely did answer my question. I think I mean, there have been so many crises that have kind of been popping up ever since the pandemic kind of set in. One, you had like the domestic abuse
Yeah,
cases. I remember reading this random statistic which said that almost, I think, every hour, more than like 6 complaints are being lodged by just the Delhi police for
yeah,
domestic abuse. And like animals were also, for the longest, the dogs of Delhi didn't have people giving them food anymore, either because like they were not
yeah,
stepping out of their houses, or like, there weren't enough people who could afford to do that. So I think that the
yeah,
major issue here was also the lack of fast response to this crisis, which is what this entire pandemic has kind of brought out, is this major gap that exists in the way that the policy field operates in India in general, is that it's very slow. Like you said,
yeah,
we need people to have like instant solutions, but that was something that we didn't see happening for the longest. In fact, like I remember there was
yeah,
a migrant crisis, and there just have been back-to-back problems which could have been solved much faster, but then it just escalated and escalated, and it took a few months to kind of find solutions to these. So I think definitely one,
I,
yeah, go on.
uh, yeah, I mean, just to add to that, right? For example, it's a very simple example, but this is something that you can mull over and think about. As to, we talk about data privacy and data security, and that is why we have a bill, right? Which is still a draft. It has not become law yet, right? But imagine this pandemic led led all of us to pool our data to identify, okay, so there is a positive COVID patient 500 meters around my house, right? There is a COVID patient just 100 meters around my house. And I mean, the policy couldn't keep up, but data surveillance became a very legitimate threat, right? We were suddenly propelled into a scenario where collective good was much more important than our individual privacy security concerns, right? So how is policy going to keep up? These are wicked problems that require very interesting and thoughtful and sustainable solutions. But yeah, right, what we thought was not possible enough, like i I couldn't have imagined to myself that, okay, I'll give my data like that just because, so that someone else can check, oh, okay, there's a COVID patient or some 50 meters around, so I should avoid this space. No, I would have never thought about giving my Aadhaar details or any other details for that matter. Not Aadhaar, but basic demographic details will also seem like too private for me. But today we are in this world where everyone knows where you are. So policy has to keep up. And that starts from everyone taking a collective interest in, the uh, new and seemingly intractable problems that we are facing these days. Yeah, I mean, this was just an example that just hit me because I was
No,
thinking about it a few months back.
no, for sure. I mean, when the Arogya Setu Act came up, I remember a lot of people had concerns, but at the same time, it was not something that was vocalized as loudly as you would assume, considering how much
Yeah,
that, I mean, fact that you may require it to be mandatory by law or something a lot of people took issue with, and I think it was interesting to see that even response to that came a little slower than I thought it would go. But by and
yeah,
large, like, I understand that we still are amidst a very troubling and I would say extraordinary circumstance. So I think what would be interesting is to see how, like, these measures which have been adopted so far will kind of be taken back. And I think this is like something that's been going
yeah,
on globally. Like, most a lot of governments abroad have also been utilizing data without the permission of individuals to go ahead and track by saying that it is for the greater benefit of citizens. So I think it would be interesting to see
yeah,
how they go back to the importance given to individual rights. I think that interplay is something that I hope policy has a more active response to. And like you said,
yeah,
one way we can remedy this is by individuals being more aware of what is being asked of them and how and what is
yeah,
going to be done with what is asked of them. So
yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's it for now. Yukti, thank you so much for such an interesting conversation. It was great having this time to talk to you. I think everyone and the viewers, especially, and me especially, learned a lot about
yeah,
just the various ways you can kind of enter the system and the importance of needing people from different backgrounds. Like, it can't just
yeah,
be people from one specific walk of life, because then that it becomes an echo chamber. And I think that is something we need
yes,
to kind of try to fix as soon as possible. So thank you once
yes.
again, Yukti, for tuning in.
It
And
it was wonderful talking to you, Arunima. Thank you so much.
thank you so much. So thank you everyone to watches this video till the end. We will be uploading more videos soon. This is part of a larger series, like I mentioned before, Humans of Public Policy, and do catch us on our various social media websites as well. Thank you,
Thank
Yukti. I
you.
think with this, let me end.